Welcome to another edition of Architect Tomorrow. I'm really pleased to say that today we have Gunnar Menzel from Capgemini joining us to talk about architecture.
Our job as an architect is to decomplexify. Our job is to make it easy to understand. Was it Einstein who said, it's not easy? What did he say? Something around easy and complex.
I was going to say the other phrase I like is you don't truly understand something if you can't explain it simply.
I think that was the way you did it. But it's true. I mean, we sometimes have the tendency of, when we as an architect worked on an assignment, say for 2 weeks or for 3 weeks. And sometimes it is sometimes the case, if you're an enterprise architect, the outcome is one slide. And of course, if then your stakeholder, your customer comes to you and says, hang on a second, I just spent 3 weeks for you to create this one slide. Of course, it's sometimes hard to kind of say, well, what do you want? Do you want the outcome or do you want quantity? I can give you the middle.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I hadn't thought about that, but I think you're right. I think as architects, we often feel like we need to justify our existence, right? Because it's sometimes hard for organizations to understand our direct business value. And so perhaps we try and justify our work by showing the inner workings. It's kind of, I think you're right. I think oftentimes we present the sort of almost the inside of the house, of the architecture house, as it were, when people don't care. People don't ultimately want to know how the factory works. They want the product at the end. And so I think, that's a really interesting sort of perspective around, you need to be confident enough maybe to say, look, this is the simple answer that you asked for. And if they do push back and say, well, there's all this stuff here that I had to do in order to get to this answer, but actually you really just need this answer. I think many of us probably suffer from imposter syndrome a little bit as well, right? For me, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's two different audiences. I think as architects, we sometimes confuse what is for ourselves and for peers, and what is for our end customer.
It's always better to give like examples. Imagine you go to a carpenter, and you say to this carpenter, he's well renowned for making beautiful wardrobes. So you go to the carpenter, you say, can you please build me a beautiful wardrobe? What does typically happen? He then says, okay, I'll do it, give me the money. And then he builds over 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And then after 5 weeks, you come back, you look at the wardrobe, you say, wow, that's beautiful. And you take it away. If you use that analogy on the architects community, typically happens as an architect is, before you see the wardrobe, you first get shown all the tools that are used to build a wardrobe. And then I want to make sure that you understand the difficulty for building and buying, procuring, maintaining this tool. Don't care about a wardrobe. I haven't seen it yet. But just look at those screwdrivers and look at the hammer. And I'm a very special hammer. It will take 10, 15 minutes explaining exactly how the hammer was produced and how special that thing is, just for you to appreciate the process of going through building the beautiful wardrobe, and you still haven't seen it yet. And then the second thing, of course, is exactly what you said. I will then go into minute detail, explaining exactly how difficult it is, how much skill I needed for the last 4 weeks to build this beautiful wardrobe, and you still haven't seen it then. Only then, right at the end, will the door open, and then you see the beautiful wardrobe. And then the client says, okay, beautiful, I can have it. And that's exactly sometimes the problem. I mean, I'm German. I come from an engineering background, so we're quite used to kind of first explaining the approach you're taking for building something. It's part of our DNA. It's part of, if you look at university, that's the way we used to be taught. You articulate exactly all the steps you're going through, and then you answer. Typically, that doesn't work in the kind of an hour space. You have to use the Anglo-Saxon space. Give the answer first. If the client will then say, hang on a second, you charged me £10,000 for this. Why is that? Then, of course, you have to unpack. You then have to explain. It's the same with a carpenter. If you go and see the beautiful wardrobe, he says, it cost me £5,000, a lot of money. Then you can say, but look, these are the tools I needed to building this because it's very special. And look at all the wood that I procured. And the wood came from you have to turn it the other way around.
It's a great way of looking at it. It's a great analogy. I mean, I think that leads me on to kind of almost the resilience. I mean, I think the other thing from my own experience here is that you almost feel like you need to have all the sort of information to justify why a project needs to consider, or perhaps an agile team needs to consider some of the non-functional, some of the other things that we as architects have been thinking about, because we're thinking about perhaps, we're perhaps non-linear thinkers sometimes, right? And we think, we get you guys are in project mode, but we're already kind of in when this application is going to be sunset, or we're already thinking about how is this going to impact, other things, because we can see the bigger picture. And I think this resilience thing for me is key, that like you need to be able to accept that folks are going to push back against your suggestions because perhaps they are going to add cost, add time, add complexity, and sort of you feel the need to kind of explain in great detail why it's super important to make something elastically scalable, or why it's important that there is high availability or other things, when actually the team that are doing it are like, no, we just need to get the functionality delivered by the deadline. And it's this kind of time cost quality piece, and it feels like the architect is almost the the kind of champion for the quality piece, and that can sometimes be quite hard, to kind of constantly be that person saying, oh yeah, it's great what you guys are doing, but can we just sort of focus on some of this other stuff that's below the waterline?
You need to find a good balance there. I think the triangle you just referred to, time, cost, quality, I think there's clearly kind of a balance that you have to strike. I mean, I totally agree. I mean, coming from a technical background, NFRs, non-functional characteristics, was really close to my heart. Scalability, reliability, performance. How do you maintain a database in life? How do you do reorgs while the application is up and running? You have a cluster solution because it's 4 nines, 5 nines, and thinking about all the various permutations is typically something the architect would do.
Yeah.
It's not typical for the developer to think and worry about these things, because they're focused, quite rightly so, on the functional characteristics. They are there to deliver changes or features, functions. As an architect, typically as a technical architect or solution architect, are there to make sure it's exactly that what you said. It is not just about the solution today. Particularly when you look at projects, because a project itself, and that works if you're an architect in an account or for a client who is there for a longer period. Projects only there for a period for a month, 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 2 weeks, and then they're gone. So they only care about the deliverables, milestones at that date. What that is to this function or feature in a year's time or 2 years' time, unless that was a functional requirement, they don't really mind, because it's not within their scope, quite rightly so. You can't load everything to do everything. But it's for you as an architect to challenge appropriately and really think about the wider implications.